First contact in the frost. The research vessel Celestial Seeker drifted silently through the perpetual twilight of Proxima Centauri B's orbital path. Chief Researcher Zilix stood before the ship's observation window, her iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to midnight blue as she processed the impossible data before her. "Confirm readings," she commanded, her inner eyelids flickering rapidly. "Show me thermal mapping again." The ship's AI complied, projecting a three-dimensional hologram of the planet's surface. Most of it glowed in various shades of deep blue, indicating temperatures that would freeze nitrogen solid. But there, in a region that should have been completely lifeless, pulsed clusters of warm light. "Impossible," muttered Science Officer Kren, his tentacles curling tightly against his thorax. "The surface temperature is -207 degrees Celsius. Nothing should be generating that kind of heat signature, let alone sustaining it." Zilix's scales rippled with anticipation. Her team had been tasked with mapping potential habitable zones in the Proxima Centauri system, but this defied all known parameters of survivability. The planet was tightly locked to its star, creating a permanent twilight zone between its scorching day side and frozen night side. Even the most advanced civilizations in the Galactic Council had deemed this region uninhabitable. "Deploy observation drones," she ordered. "Maximum stealth protocols." A swarm of sleek, crystalline drones detached from the Celestial Seeker's hull, descending through the methane-rich atmosphere. As they approached the heat signatures, the impossible became undeniable. Buildings rose from the ice like frozen flowers, their surfaces gleaming with a strange, rippling energy field that seemed to dance with the aurora above. Bridges of some transparent material spanned vast chasms in the ice, and beneath them, glimpses of warm light suggested subterranean structures extending deep below the surface. "Life signs detected," announced the ship's eye. "Multiple readings consistent with human physiology." Zilix's scales flashed brilliant gold in surprise. Humans were a relatively new species to join the galactic community, and most council members regarded them as primitive. Their homeworld was temperate, their technology unremarkable. How had they managed to build this? As the drones continued their survey, they captured images of humans moving about the settlement in environmental suits that seemed impossibly thin for such extreme conditions. They worked with practiced efficiency, maintaining equipment, entering and exiting buildings through airlocks that barely seemed to lose any heat. "Look there," Kren pointed with a tentacle. One of the drones had found what appeared to be an agricultural facility. Through transparent panels, they could see rows of plants growing in soil that should have been frozen solid. The humans had somehow created a self-sustaining ecosystem in conditions that should have killed any living thing instantly. "They're not just surviving here," Zilix observed, her scales shifting to a contemplative green. "They're thriving. But how are they managing the energy requirements? The heat loss alone should be." Her voice trailed off as the drones revealed something even more extraordinary. The humans had apparently forged some kind of relationship with the local ice-dwelling organisms, massive crystalline creatures that the Council had long assumed to be nothing more than mineral formations. The creatures seemed to be helping maintain the colony's temperature regulation systems, their own bioelectric fields integrating seamlessly with human technology. "This changes everything," Zilix whispered. "Every assumption we've made about survival parameters, about the classification of intelligence, about the very nature of adaptation." A sudden movement caught her attention. One of the humans had stopped their work and was looking directly at the nearest drone. Instead of showing fear or surprise, they simply waved, then made a gesture that universal translators identified as an invitation to come closer. "They knew we were here all along," Kren realized, his tentacles writhing in agitation. "Our stealth technology is based on principles that might be quite obvious to beings who have learned to survive in these conditions," Zilix finished. Her scales settled into a deep, determined purple. "Prepare a first contact protocol. The Council's non-interference directive doesn't apply here. These humans have already mastered conditions we deemed impossible. We're not here to study them. We're here to learn from them. As the celestial seeker began its descent toward the designated landing zone, Xylix couldn't help but wonder how many other assumptions her civilization had made about the nature of life, intelligence, and adaptation were about to be challenged by these remarkable beings who had made their home in the frost. The warmth of innovation. The landing zone turned out to be a massive platform carved directly from the ice, its surface treated with some kind of nano-engineered coating that provided perfect traction despite the extreme cold. As Xylix and her team descended from the celestial seeker, their environmental suits automatically adjusted to compensate for the brutal temperature, yet she noticed the approaching humans wore far lighter protection. "Welcome to New Svalbard," called out a tall human with rich, dark skin and silver-streaked hair. "I'm Dr. Maya Chen, Colony Director. We've been wondering when someone would notice us out here." Xylix's translator took a moment to process the casual warmth in the human's tone. "I am Chief Researcher Xylix. How are you maintaining these conditions? The energy requirements alone should be." Maya laughed, the sound somehow carrying clearly through her sleek helmet. "Come inside. It's easier to show you than tell you." The airlock they entered was unlike anything in Xylix's experience. Instead of the expected energy-intensive heating system, it employed a series of graduated temperature zones that actually harvested the thermal differential to generate power. By the time they reached the inner chamber, her instruments indicated the system had captured enough energy from their passage to power itself for several hours. "Brilliant," muttered Kren, his tentacles waving in excitement. "You're not fighting the cold. You're using it." "Exactly," Maya said, leading them into what appeared to be a central command center. "When we first arrived here, we tried to apply standard colonial engineering. Brute force environmental control, massive power plants, thick walls. Everything failed within days. The room they entered hummed with life, its walls displaying real-time data from throughout the colony. Xylix noticed that many of the readings were being processed through crystalline structures that seemed to grow directly from the ice walls. Then we met the Frost Singers," Maya continued, gesturing to one of the large crystalline creatures visible through a window. It was even more magnificent up close, its faceted body pulsing with bioelectric energy. "We thought they were just mineral formations at first, until they started responding to our thermal emissions. The Council classified them as non-sentient crystal formations," Xylix admitted, her scales flushing pink with embarrassment. "They're actually colonial organisms," Maya explained, bringing up a detailed holographic display. "Each one is a collective of billions of smaller entities, and they've evolved an incredible method of thermal regulation. Once we learned to communicate with them, everything changed." The display showed how the humans had developed a symbiotic relationship with the Frost Singers. The creatures naturally maintained stable temperature differentials as part of their life cycle, and the humans had found a way to integrate their colony systems with this process. The result was a virtually self-sustaining thermal management system that required minimal external energy input. "But that's just the beginning," Maya said, leading them deeper into the colony. They entered what appeared to be an agricultural center, where plants grew in spiraling patterns around central crystalline cores. "The Singers helped us understand how to cultivate food here too. Their crystalline structures can channel and focus the weak sunlight from the twilight zone, and their electrical fields help maintain soil temperatures perfect for growing." Xylix watched in amazement as humans and Frost Singers worked together, their movements choreographed like some strange dance. The creatures would pulse with bioluminescent patterns, and the humans would respond with adjustments to their equipment or changes in the environmental settings. "You've developed a genuine language with them," Kren observed, his tentacles curling in fascination. "More than that," Maya replied, her face glowing with pride. "We've learned that they experience time differently than we do. To them, the movement of glaciers is like watching waves on an ocean. They've taught us to see this environment in an entirely new way, and in return, we've helped them explore aspects of their world they never could before." Xylix's scales shifted through a rainbow of colors as she processed the implications. Her civilization had dismissed this region of space as a dead zone, the Frost Singers as mindless formations, and humans as primitive newcomers. Yet here they all were, creating something entirely new together. "Dr. Chen," she said carefully, "would your colony be interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council? I believe there is much we could learn from each other." Maya smiled, but there was a hint of steel in her expression. "We'd be happy to, but on one condition. The Frost Singers must be recognized as a sentient species and included in any negotiations. We're not just a human colony anymore. We're something new." As if in response to her words, the nearest Frost Singer erupted in a cascade of crystalline chimes, its body pulsing with patterns of light that Zilix somehow knew represented agreement. She realized that the Council's entire approach to classifying life and intelligence might need to be reconsidered. Breaking point. The first tremor caught everyone by surprise. Deep beneath the ice, something shifted, sending vibrations through the entire colony. The Frost Singers responded instantly, their crystalline bodies pulsing with urgent patterns of light and sound. "They're agitated," Maya said, rushing to the central monitoring station. They'd never displayed these frequencies before. Zilix watched as human technicians worked in perfect synchronization with the crystalline beings, their hands flying over control panels while the Singers modulated their bioelectric fields. Data streams showed massive thermal fluctuations building deep beneath the surface. "There's a thermal plume rising from the core," Kren reported, his tentacles twisted with concern. "The temperature differential is creating structural instability in the ice shelf. The whole colony could collapse," Maya realized, her face grim. "And your ship? The landing zone is directly above the most unstable area." As if to emphasize her words, another tremor shook the facility, stronger than the first. Through the windows, they could see cracks beginning to form in the massive ice walls that had stood solid for millennia. "We need to evacuate," Zilix declared, her scales shifting to emergency red. "The Celestial Seeker can accommodate your entire population." But Maya was already shaking her head, her attention focused on the Frost Singers. The creatures had formed a circle, their bodies resonating with a deep, harmonious frequency that seemed to penetrate the very ice itself. "They're trying to tell us something," she said. "Look at their pattern formation. It's similar to how they channel thermal energy for our agricultural systems, but on a massive scale." Zilix's scientific training warred with her survival instincts. "Dr. Chen, we don't have time to." "Yes, we do," Maya interrupted, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "The Singers don't just help us manage temperature. They understand it in ways we never could. They're showing us how to save both our homes." The human turned to her team. "Redirect all power to the thermal exchange network. Link every circuit, every conduit. The Singers are going to try to create a planetary-scale heat sink." "That's impossible," Kren protested. "The energy requirements would be impossible for any one species," Maya agreed. "But we're not one species anymore." What followed was unlike anything Zilix had ever witnessed. Humans worked with practiced efficiency, reconfiguring their colony systems, while the Frost Singers expanded their resonance pattern. The Celestial Seeker's crew, following Maya's instructions, adjusted their ship's energy fields to complement the growing network. The ice continued to crack and groan around them, but now there was a pattern to it. The Frost Singers were somehow using the very instability that threatened them, channeling the thermal energy through their crystalline networks and into carefully controlled release points. "It's working," Maya announced, watching the readings. "The Singers are creating a distributed thermal regulation system across the entire ice shelf. They're using our technology to amplify their natural abilities, turning the whole colony into one massive thermal exchanger." Zilix's scales shifted to amazed gold as she watched the temperature gradient stabilize. The humans hadn't just learned to survive in this environment. They'd learned to work with it, to understand it on its own terms. And now, faced with catastrophe, They'd found a way to bring their alien visitors into that harmony as well. "The Council needs to know about this," she said quietly. "Not just about the technology or the singers, but about this integration. You've done more than build a colony here. You've created a whole new way of thinking about adaptation." Maya smiled, reaching out to touch one of the frost stingers. The creature's crystalline surface rippled with patterns of welcome. "That's the real secret of human survival," she said. "We never try to conquer our environment. We learn from it, grow with it, become part of it. And in doing so, we all become something more than we were." As the crisis subsided, Xylix realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. 3 vastly different species, working in perfect harmony to achieve something none of them could have managed alone. The Council's rigid classification systems and assumptions about survival seemed hopelessly inadequate in the face of such adaptation. The ice had stopped cracking, and now the Frost Singer's song took on a different tone. Not warning or distress, but something that felt surprisingly like celebration. The thaw. In the days following the crisis, New Stalbard was transformed. The successful merging of human technology, Frost Singer biology, and celestial seeker systems had created something entirely new, a hybrid infrastructure that made the colony more stable than ever before. Xylix stood in the newly expanded observation dome, watching humans and Frost Singers work together to strengthen the thermal exchange network. Her scales rippled with shades of wonder as she dictated her report to the Council. "The implications of what we've witnessed here go far beyond mere survival," she recorded. "The humans have demonstrated that true adaptation isn't about dominating an environment, but becoming part of its natural cycles. Their partnership with the Frost Singers represents a completely new paradigm of interspecies cooperation." "Still trying to find the right words?" Maya asked, joining her at the window. In the distance, the celestial seeker gleamed in the perpetual twilight, its systems now permanently linked to the colony's network. "Your Council isn't going to know what to make of this," Maya continued, gesturing to where one of her engineers was literally dancing with a Frost Singer, their movements synchronizing to fine-tune a thermal regulator. "They're used to categorizing species by their technological advancement, their environmental tolerances, their cognitive capabilities. But what happens when species stop being separate and start becoming more?" Xylix's scales shifted to thoughtful blue. "Perhaps that's exactly what they need to see. The Council's entire approach to classification and first contact is based on the assumption that species develop in isolation, that there are clear boundaries between different forms of life." The observation dome, filled with crystalline chimes as a group of Frost Singers, began what the humans called a story song, a complex pattern of light and sound that conveyed not just information, but experience. Through their connection to the colony systems, the aliens could now share in these communications, experiencing the world as the singers did. "Watch this," Maya said with pride. A young human child approached one of the singers, placing their hands on its crystalline surface. The creature's lights shifted to a softer pattern, and the child's movements began to mirror its rhythms. This generation is growing up understanding the singer's language as naturally as they understand human speech. They don't see boundaries between species, they just see different ways of being alive. Kren, who had been analyzing data from the crisis, joined them with his tentacles rippling excitedly. "The thermal exchange network we created isn't just maintaining temperature," he reported. "It's actually improving the efficiency of every system in the colony. The singers are learning from our technology, while teaching us how to better utilize their natural abilities. That's the real breakthrough," Maya said. "Every species in this colony is evolving, not in isolation, but in response to each other. We're creating new possibilities together that none of us could have imagined alone." As if to demonstrate her point, a previously unseen pattern of lights began cascading through the Frost Singer community. The crystalline beings had discovered a way to use the thermal exchange network to communicate directly with the celestial seeker's AI, creating a three-way translation system that bridged the gap between all three species. The Council's non-interference directive was based on the fear that advanced species would dominate less developed ones. Xylix Muse, her scales showing bands of revelation. But you've shown that true advancement comes from collaboration, from finding ways to grow together rather than compete. Maya smiled, touching the wall where a frost singer's crystalline structure merged seamlessly with human architecture. That's the thing about humans. We never wanted to be the most advanced species in the galaxy. We just wanted to learn, to understand, to connect. And in doing so, we've all become something new. The observation dome filled with a harmony of human voices, crystalline songs, and the humming of alien technology, all working together in perfect synchronization. The sound seemed to carry a promise of possibilities that no single species could have conceived. Your colony isn't just surviving in impossible conditions, Xylix realized. You're showing us what the future of galactic civilization could be, not a hierarchy of separate species, but a symphony of life finding new ways to grow together. Outside, the eternal twilight painted the ice in shades of possibility, while inside, the boundaries between species continued to blur and transform, creating something the galaxy had never seen before. Seeds of change. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so silent. The holographic display at its center showed the merged life signs of New Stalbard, human, frost singer, and visiting alien all pulsing together in patterns that defied traditional classification. Xylix stood before the assembled council representatives, her scale steady and determined. Behind her, Maya Chen and a projection of a frost singer named Dawn Chime waited to address the gathering. Distinguished council members, Xylix began, what you're seeing is not a mistake or an anomaly. It is the future. The humans of New Svalbard have not merely survived in conditions we deemed impossible. They have shown us that our entire understanding of survival, adaptation, and intelligence needs to be reconsidered. The chamber's crystalline walls reflected the shifting colors of hundreds of assembled species as data from the colony streamed across multiple displays. It watched humans working in perfect harmony with frost singers, using technology that merged biological and mechanical principles in ways that violated dozens of council engineering protocols. Our classification systems, Xylix continued, are based on the assumption that species must either dominate their environment or be dominated by it. The humans have shown us a third path, one of integration and mutual evolution. Maya stepped forward, her presence commanding despite being the only human in the chamber. We didn't set out to challenge your assumptions, she said. We simply did what humans have always done. We adapted, we learned, and we connected. The frost singers weren't obstacles to be overcome or resources to be exploited. They were teachers, partners, friends. Dawn Chime's projection pulsed with patterns that the new translation system rendered into words all could understand. We were alone in the ice for eons, dreaming in rhythms too slow for others to hear. The humans taught us to dance in new timeframes, to share our songs across distances we never imagined. Together, we have become a harmony that changes both the singers and the song. The Council's chief administrator, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, spoke. This is unprecedented. You're proposing we not only recognize the frost singers as a sentient species, but also classify New Stalbard as a single integrated ecosystem, a merged civilization. We're proposing more than that, Maya replied. We're suggesting that your entire approach to discovering and classifying new life needs to change. How many other species have you dismissed as non-sentient because they communicated in ways you couldn't recognize? How many environments have you labeled as uninhabitable because you couldn't imagine new ways of inhabiting them? The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations, but fell silent as Dawn Chime began to emit a complex pattern of light and sound. The crystalline walls of the chamber themselves seemed to resonate with the singer's song. Even now, Maya translated, though most could feel the meaning. Your chamber responds to our harmonics. Your own seat of government was built by ancient species who understood what you have forgotten, that the boundaries between different forms of life are not walls, but bridges waiting to be discovered. Xylix's scales rippled with profound understanding as she made her final argument. The Council was founded on the principle of preserving and protecting life throughout the galaxy. But preservation doesn't mean keeping things unchanging in separate categories. Real preservation means allowing life to grow, adapt, and evolve together. The Chief Administrator's crystalline matrix pulsed with decision. We will need time to process these implications, but one thing is clear. Our protocols for planetary classification and species interaction must be revised. New Stalbard will serve as a model for a new kind of exploration and colonization, one based on integration rather than isolation. As the council session concluded, Maya stood with Xylix in one of the chamber's observation galleries, watching the endless stream of space traffic against the galactic core. "Do you think they really understand what this means?" Maya asked. "This isn't just about changing protocols. It's about changing how we think about life itself." Xylix's scales showed a pattern that humans would recognize as a smile. "They will. Because you've shown us something we can't unsee, that the true measure of a civilization isn't its ability to conquer new worlds, but its capacity to become part of them." Back on New Stalbard, the eternal twilight painted the ice in familiar patterns of light and shadow. But now, those patterns were part of a larger dance, one that stretched across the galaxy, breaking down barriers between species and worlds, creating new harmonies in the endless song of life. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving in the impossible cold. It was about discovering that nothing is truly impossible when different forms of life learn to grow together, turning boundaries into bridges and isolation into harmony.